Hey, everybody. Welcome to Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters. It's episode 132 of the podcast. And here we are yet again, talking all about NHL prospects, talking about the AHL college hockey. And we'll also talk about the CHL-USA Prospects Challenge that is coming up in about a month. So a lot happening, a lot going on. And we also want to get you caught up on everything that's happening on Flo Hockey. But today we are going to talk a lot about prospects, NHL draft prospects, guys that are in the AHL right now. A lot to get to. Before we do that, want to remind you, now is a great time to subscribe to Flo Hockey. It's early in the season. You can get a ton of great stuff, including the AHL, ECHL, SPHL, college hockey, junior hockey. We also have the SHL, select games throughout the season from Sweden, which has been great to see. We just had today, I watched Axel Sandin Pellikka and Michael Brandsegg Nygaard from Skellefteå, as they are also Detroit Red Wings prospects. So it's pretty cool to be able to watch as many prospects. I think that's probably the largest collection of prospects that you can watch under one subscription. So make sure you do subscribe to Flo Hockey today. And one event that we're going to be covering, as part of our NHL draft coverage, in terms of what we do on the editorial side of things, is the CHL NHL or CHL USHL Prospects Challenge, which is a highly anticipated event. And we just got Team CHL's roster. So the reason we're going to talk about it is because this is an NHL draft podcast, and this is one of the NHL draft events of the year, whether it's on Flo Hockey or not, whatever it is, you are going to be wanting to follow this because it is an incredible event, and one that we've been talking about for a long time, wanting to see. We wanted to see a little bit of that cross-border rivalry, and certainly Team CHL versus the National Team Development Program's under 18 team, all draft eligible players. It is going to be one of the scouting events of the year. So we finally got the CHL prospects roster today, as of the day that we're recording it. So great timing, CHL. Thanks for making this happen. I already had a little write-up about this team and about this roster. One thing to get out of the way early, unfortunately, Roger McQueen, a top 10 projected pick for this class, is injured and won't be able to participate in this event. So that is a big loss for Team CHL. It's probably good news for Team USA, because that is one large human that will no longer be able to participate. However, it does sound like Matthew Schaefer, who has missed most of this season so far, all of this season so far, with illness, is expected to be on the roster and playing in this event, recovered in time for this. So he is one of the top defensemen for this class. But let's talk about this forward group, because I think Canada as a whole is going to have an incredible roster, or incredible draft year of Canadian-born players. We've talked a lot about how the world is continuing to grow and expand, and we're seeing guys go number one from USA, from Russia, from Slovakia, from Sweden, all these different things. You've seen it over the last few years. And of course, last year it was a Canadian going number one, Macklin Celebrini, but a Canadian that played U.S. college hockey. So very interestingly, we'll now have one of the guys that is in the hunt for number one. And that, of course, is Porter Martone of the Brampton Steelheads. And Martone is off to an incredibly hot start in his draft season. 20 points scored for Brampton in 9 OHL games. He has been a dominant force. He has looked every bit like the potential number one pick. He will challenge James Hagins for that designation. Porter Martone, of course, has the size. He has the offensive sense. He has the competitiveness. I think that his skating continues to improve and to become more of an asset to him. But really, I think it's his hockey sense. It's that competitive nature and that size and athleticism combination that he's able to bring to the table. That's going to be a tough guy for Team USA to slow down. So we'll see how that goes. But I think Martone very well could be a dominant presence in this entire thing. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to do as a prospect in this game. The other guy that I think I'm really intrigued to watch in this particular setting, because of how amazingly he started the season, is Michael Misa. A lot of us had kind of written him off as part of the first overall discussion, and maybe he's not going to get to that point, but what he's doing right now needs to be recognized and needs to be noticed, and it certainly is being noticed by NHL scouts, and now he will be part of this team, Michael Misa, of the Saginaw Spirit. So Currently second in the OHL right now with 21 points. He is the top goal scorer in the league with 14 goals in 10 games. He has been on fire and unstoppable at the early goings of this season. And really, I think what we've seen is Michael Misa taking charge for really the first time. I mean, he had a great rookie year as a 15-year-old and as an exceptional status season. 16-year-old, he was fine, not amazing, didn't light the world on fire, but he was on a very deep team in Saginaw that ended up winning the Memorial Cup. And he had a hand in that. Now it's more his team than it's ever been. And now it's his opportunity to kind of take control. And we're seeing him take the ball and run with it. And that's the thing that I think seeing in this game. Does he take over shifts? Does he dictate play? Is he a play driver alongside his peers? And now you'll recall, Misa did not play in the Hlinka Gretzky Cup last year. He did the year before, but he didn't play in it in August with his draft team. So some of these guys are going to have familiarity from that tournament. He's not going to be one of those players. So it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic of how this team shifts. But that is a guy that I have got my eye on very closely in this particular setting because we've been watching him this year, and boy, does he look good for the Saginaw Spirit. So Matthew Schaefer, who I mentioned earlier, he's the top defenseman for this team. I think he's going to be a guy that we're all watching, and a lot of us are going to be watching because it might be some of his earliest game action of the season. He had a great Hlinka Gretzky Cup, but he's been out with mono. It's been kind of week-to-week situation for him, so he's going to have to recover, build up his strength, all those different things. It's not the ideal way to start a draft season, but hopefully he gets over it rather quickly and is able to contribute. But what we've seen from Schaefer so far in his young career is that he's an outstanding defenseman, that he is a great skater, and he is going to make things very difficult with his ability to move pucks on the rush and his ability to transition pucks. I think that's going to be really important for him. A guy that, he's on the masthead of the game promotion right now, Cole Reshney, playing in the WHL. He's another player that had a great Hlinka Gretzky Cup. He is one of the top scorers there, and Reshney now with 13 points in 9 games so far in the WHL. And so he has definitely taken a big step. But I think even more, we want to see more domination. Can he do it again here with this? One of the things that Canada has been dogged over for years now is its lack of goaltending development. Yet the 2 goalies on this roster are very exciting young talents. Jack Ivankovic from the Brampton Steelheads, and then also you've got Joshua Ravensbergen from the Prince George Cougars. And right now, Ravensbergen is having a little bit of a tough season. I shouldn't say a tough season because he's had success on the scoreboard. Save percentage wise, he's currently sub 900. Not ideal in the draft season, especially since that's not his where he's typically at. But then you look at the other guy, the guy that's going to be sharing the crease with them, and we expect both of these guys to start at least one game here. Jack Ivankovic, who is undefeated so far this season, has a .936 save percentage in the OHL. Anytime I see a junior hockey goalie with a save percentage that's north of .915, I'm starting to get my eyes open a little bit. Now, it's really early in the season. Ivankovic does not have the size that NHL teams covet. However, he is a very talented goaltender, so we'll see exactly how that all plays out for him. But him and Ravensbergen, 2 really, really good goalies in this group for the draft eligibles. Ravensbergen was in Canada's camp as well for the World Juniors, so he's in the mix for that team. Where those 2 guys go in the draft ultimately, could one of them sneak into the first round? I think both of them will probably slip no further than the second based on the pedigree that they've shown, unless they have a really terrible season. They're both off to a good start. Now, we've talked a little bit about Team USA, and the U.S. team will have the NTDP roster. So the U.S. National Under-18 team will be the one that is competing against Team CHL. And they've had a very up and down, uneven season. They've had some tough games against colleges so far. They've struggled in some of those games. They've even had some tough games against USHL teams. So this is going to be interesting because this game dynamic, you've got the team that's always together with the under-18s, and then you bring together an all-star team. However, a lot of those guys do have experience with each other. They played at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, or some of them played at the under-18 World Championship. And so they're going to have some familiarity. So that'll be interesting. But I think when you look at a pure talent perspective, it's a tough year for USA to kind of go into this game because I do think that the NTDP's talent level is a little bit tougher to match what the CHL is going to be putting out this particular season. This isn't like the 97s or the 2001s that had just a litany of first round draft picks in their roster. There's a couple of guys with a chance to be in the first round. They've also been without LJ Mooney for the last few weeks due to injury. So there's a lot of different things that are kind of coming into play. But that familiarity with each other, having played together for a year plus already, that should help kind of narrow the talent gap that I think is pretty evident at this particular game. I got my plans to head out there. I already booked my travel. So I will be going out to this event November 26th and 27th. It'll be in London and Oshawa. So two OHL hotbeds. I am sure the tickets will be flying off the shelves there for those two games. Obviously, some great venues for this event as well. Really looking forward to seeing how it all works, who stands out, how this works with having CHL top prospects and other events. Will this replace that? Well, there's a lot of unknowns at this point, but all I know is that there's probably going to be upwards of 200 plus NHL personnel at this event. I think you'll see a lot of NHL general managers there. It's 2 days. It's in November. It's right before Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, or if you're in Canada, it's a Thursday. That particular week. Lots to look forward to. I think this is going to be one of the great events of the scouting calendar. I'm really looking forward to getting my notes together and seeing how they compare with what we've seen so far. So CHL USA Top Prospects Challenge, November 26th and 27th. We will continue to cover it for you on Flo Hockey and get you ready for that event. But go ahead and check out FloHockey.tv for the article breaking down Canada's whole roster and with their entire roster on there. All right. We're going to move on now. We're going to talk a little college hockey since we just spent some time with the CHL. Let's go on the other side of the border and also to the very top of the draft class. And as of right now, James Hagins has started his collegiate career. He's played in 3 games so far. He has points in all of them. He did score his first collegiate goal last week in a 5-0 win over AIC. So James Hagins has done nothing to dissuade us from the idea that he's going to be a top player. Now, BC has not had him with primarily Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault. There have been some shifts out there. Perreault actually did assist on James Hagins' first NCAA goal. But Oscar Jelvik has been kind of the top center for Boston College. I think part of that is to spread the wealth of offense a little bit because as we've seen without Will Smith and Cutter Gauthier, there is quite a bit of a gap between what BC is able to put out in its top 6 versus what it can put out in its bottom 6. And so we're seeing James Hagins take on more of that role where he's got a line that he's got to drive, he's got to have the puck. And I think ultimately that probably was a great decision by Greg Brown to give him more time away from the elite players like Leonard and Perreault, who want to also have the puck a lot. So there's a lot going on there, but really like what I've seen so far from James Hagins in the games that I've watched. I think that, the strength, the effort level, the speed, the skill, all there. It's all coming together. He doesn't look any different to me than last season in terms of, having been struggling with the transition or anything like that. He is one of the best players in college hockey in terms of talent overall and still very much in the mix. But when you see what Porter Martone is doing in the OHL and you see, unfortunately, Anton Frundell has been injured still in Sweden. When you see certain things, you're saying, okay, this is going to be a race. This is going to be a real race. And I think it's really going to come down to it. And then you also look at what Misa's doing and you say, all right, let's not count out. We could have a lot of different players challenging for that top spot, but James Hagins doing what he needs to do so far to hold on to it. We also got Denver, and Denver is the defending national champion. They have played 4 games so far this season, and the Pioneers have not lost one of them. Jack Devine, who we'll talk about in a minute here, has been absolutely leading the way there. But you look up and down Denver's lineup and you just try to say, where is the weakness? Where are they going to struggle? I think once they get into their NCHC schedule, things are going to get a little bit more challenging for them. But we've seen them, they look solid so far. They look like they haven't missed a beat, even though they are missing guys like Massimo Rezzo is now in the AHL. And some of the other Shai Buyam, other players that were big parts of that team. They've moved in some new freshmen. They've moved in guys that can play. And so I'm really excited to see what happens with Denver this year, because I do think that they're looking like, again, continuing on to potentially win another national title. Boston University also 3-0 undefeated so far. Cole Yzerman with goals in every game so far. We're seeing their freshmen really step up and play a significant role for that team. Both Yzerman, Alex Zetterberg. We've seen Cole Hudson have some real impact there. So I think that, BU is going to be a team that we continue to watch. They've got a lot of youth. They got a lot of guys that are still kind of working through things, but I think that's going to be a real team to keep an eye on. And another team that's undefeated is my dark horse for the year, Western Michigan. They are 3-0 as well. The Broncos are certainly starting to look like a real contender. Alex Bump, who I think is a real talent up front for them, is an important player. And then you've got their goaltending tandem of Cam Rowe and Hampton Slakinski. Slakinski won his NCAA debut. Cam Rowe has gotten starts in the other games. They got a real tandem situation there. We'll see if that holds for the entire season, but what a great problem to have two good goaltenders that you need to find ice time for. Another team that I wasn't sure how they would do this season, given some of the losses that they sustained from their roster a season ago, is the University of Maine, and they're 3-0. And so Alfonderina continues to get rocking out there in Orono. And, I think Albin Boya, who's their goalie, who actually kind of took over for Victor Osman last year and really started, taking charge of the net, has continued to do that for the Black Bears. And so as you see a program like that has such tremendous talent, that's going to be one that I'm very excited to see. I think, Ben Barr is a guy that a lot of people throughout college circles have respect for, and a guy that I think has really figured out both an identity for his team and kind of a philosophy that'll allow them to continue to recruit higher end talent. I think Maine being back in the mix over these last 2 seasons has been really fun. Let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum, though. One team that has really struggled and is really challenged is the University of Wisconsin. It's the second season of Mike Hastings, and anytime you see a Mike Hastings team below 500, it feels weird. He has never had a losing season in his coaching career, and so for that, right now, Wisconsin is struggling. They lost 2 more games. They're 1-3 to start the season. They had a loss to Lindenwood. This is a team that kind of has to turn it around quickly. Now, they lost quite a bit from their roster last year due to transfers and departures and other things like that. They seem to mitigate that with more transfers, guys that came in and filled some holes for them. But, you look at other options and you're just saying, okay, this is not really working out. They can't score right now. Defensively, they're okay, but they can't score, and that's going to be a real problem. And, they did have a lot of guys walk out, for transfers that would have helped the scoring. William Whitelaw, Cruz Lucius among them. But then you look at Quinn Finley and the burden that's going to be placed on him and some of the transfers. And there's a lot of players in that roster that really are going to have to step up if they're going to have any success this year. I think that they have enough in terms of goaltending. They have enough in terms of defense and team defense. They got to find ways to score, and it puts a lot more pressure on guys like Quinn Finley to do it. As of right now, there's a lot of players with 9 points leading the NCAA. One of them is Jack Devine from Denver. He has been just an assist machine this year. He has 9 points through 4 games, so he's well over 2 points per game right now, and really putting in the work to be a high-end playmaker and a play driver at the collegiate level. He stayed for an extra year, had a chance probably to go pro, decided not to, sticking it out for one more season, and he's making the most of it as one of the leading scorers in the country. Among goaltenders, Jacob Fowler from Boston College now has 3 starts. He has shut out 2 teams over that span. So 2 shutouts for Jacob Fowler here. He shut out AIC and he shut out Michigan State. He has a .945 save percentage and is very much looking like one of the top goaltenders in the country. So that's what we have for our college roundup. Those guys absolutely have been outstanding. And I think we're going to be talking about a lot more college players here in the next few weeks, some tremendous individual performances at that level. And don't forget, you can always watch Atlantic Hockey America on Flo Hockey. This week, one of the more intriguing non-conference games will be Michigan State heading to Buffalo to take on Canisius. We'll talk about that one a little bit later in the show. All right, let's move on to the AHL. And of course, it's been AHL all the time here on Flo because we have been so excited to have added the AHL to the mix here. And there are just so many benefits for me as a prospects analyst to have the AHL here, to have the video. And we're going to start it by even including highlights in the podcast now. So if you're watching with us on YouTube or on Flo Hockey, you can see some of these highlights as they play. And we're going to roll a little clip here on Yaroslav Askarov. And this is a guy, a diving save there that if you're watching, you'll see just an incredible start for him. He has appeared in 2 games for the San Jose Barracuda, and he has 2 shutouts. He has not allowed a goal yet. He's one of the most entertaining players in hockey, but he hasn't had a ton of hard work as we get another look at that diving stop that he made against the Iowa Wild in a shutout earlier this week. So let's talk a little bit about what Askarov is really all about here. And you know, when he was injured during training camp or before training camp, so he didn't really get a chance with the Sharks. Now he's got a couple of starts and he's seeing the puck really well. He's making diving saves like the one you saw. He's doing all of these different things that you know you would expect a number 1 goaltender to do. San Jose, as we expected, is struggling. They're not going to have a, you know, Macklin Celebrini's been injured. There's just not a lot, you know, at this point that's super positive. So now the question becomes this. As you're kind of in this transitional phase as an organization, at what point do you put Askarov into the NHL? And is it worth it if you can't put that goaltender in a situation to have success? That's the question that I have about Askarov, because he has been so good in the AHL that I'm just very, very curious as to, you know, how long they can keep him down. But at the same time, there's a lot of other things that are kind of going to be challenging for the Sharks in these decisions. Right now, they're experiencing it with Will Smith. What do they do if things aren't going well at the NHL level? Can they just keep putting him out there? You know, I think Will Smith was always going to be one that had a little bit of a struggle. I talked on this podcast before that I didn't think he was quite ready for the next phase yet. Not to say that he had to stay at Boston College or anything like that, but now you have to have that discussion about Will Smith. Should he go down to the Barracuda, who are having success right now, especially getting goaltending as they have for Askarov? So a lot of questions left to ask. Also wanted to give a shout out to Rory Cairns, who was the AHL Player of the Week this week. Calgary Wranglers. He's got 7 goals to lead the AHL right now. And this is a guy that was a 6th-round draft pick, started his pro career in the ECHL, has spent the last 2 seasons with the Calgary Wranglers, and now he's really starting to see the fruits of those labors. And now, is he going to be a top-end goal scorer at the NHL level? I don't think so. He's probably a bottom 6 guy. But at the same time, to see the success that he's having, to see the success that Calgary as a whole is having, is very positive for the Flames, because this is another organization that's in a bit of a transitional phase. Calgary is one of those teams that's going to have to lean heavily on its AHL roster to develop talent and help them get to the Flames. Rory Cairns is off to a really great start this season. Is it anything more than a hot start? I really don't like looking into early season results and drawing sweeping conclusions, because we've seen it time and time again. A guy can look all world in the first week of the season, and then that was his best week of the whole season. When we don't have anything else to compare it to with the season, then that's, you know, we kind of get wrapped up in it. But you have to give credit where credit is due. Rory Cairns, 5 goals just last week alone, 7 on the season for him. Another player that got got called up. I mean, you know, he played so well over the first part of the AHL season that he got called up, and that's Zachary Leroux from the Milwaukee Admirals. And now he's with the Nashville Predators. He had a couple of goals against Rockford last weekend, where it was just those hardworking below the faceoff dots plays. One, I think he got a little away with a little bit of a cross check, but he is the modern day pest. You know, he's not a big guy, so he's not an enforcer, but he plays abrasive hockey. He gets underneath opponent's skin. He plays a highly energetic style, and he sometimes steps over the line, and he's been suspended many times in the QMJHL. I'm sure he'll be suspended at various points in his pro career. He plays on the edge. But I also think, and this has been referred to, said by coaches previously, in order for him to get the best out of him, you kind of got to let him be a bit of a wild pony out there and doing what he's going to do, because that's the intensity that he needs to play the game with. So now Nashville, who has not won a game in the NHL yet, is going to have this young guy into their lineup. And I think he's going to inject some energy, if nothing else. If I don't know if he'll be a permanent recall here, but his early goings in Milwaukee gave the Nashville everything they needed to know to say, we got to get something going here at the NHL level. Let's bring this guy up. I think if nothing else, it is not going to be a quiet debut. He is going to make things happen. He's going to get under people's skin. He's going to do things that I'm sure they don't love, but it'll be a lot of fun for us to watch. All right, another guy I want to talk about in the AHL is Ivan Marashenko. We're going to play a clip here as well of Marashenko, because he is becoming one of the most dangerous scorers in the AHL. Take a look at some of the releases that you're seeing right here on our platform. He's got a brilliant one-timer. He absolutely smokes pucks, and he can really shoot well off the pass, but also in stride. He can shoot in traffic. He'll get his shot off from anywhere. And so I'm very impressed with what he's been able to show as a player. Now, let's think about the journey that Marashenko has been on. He had, had to go through a cancer diagnosis in his draft season, still gets drafted in the first round, was part of the Calder Cup. We've talked about this before. But now we're seeing him put it all together and become an elite goal scorer. He has 5 goals so far for the Hershey Bears this season. I'm telling you right now, if you are a person that follows the AHL closely, enjoy Ivan Marashenko while you can, because he's not going to be around for a lot longer. The Washington Capitals have a real special player there. You think about Alex Ovechkin, you think about the guys that have been the talented Russian players that have come through Washington over the years. And I think Marashenko is going to put his name on that list very, very soon. Really impressed with what he did over the last couple of weekends. And also expecting much more of him. I'll actually be heading out to Hershey in a couple of weeks to get my eyes on the Bears, and also bring some stories back for you from Hershey, which has been absolutely one of the class organizations in professional hockey, and a survivor in a sports field that, you just think about all the different things that can go wrong for a team. And here's a team that's won 13 Calder Cups, has been around forever, and just only seems to get stronger. And so we've been really happy to be able to bring those games to you, as hopefully you've enjoyed watching some of the great shots. If you're watching the podcast of Marashenko, with both his passing, his shooting, and everything else that he does so well with the puck on his stick. Hat trick, as you're watching here from last week. One more player to talk about before we move on out of the AHL, and this one is Artur Akhtyamov, who is currently playing for the Toronto Marlies in the Toronto Maple Leaf system. And, well, right now, you think about Russian goaltenders, and they are taking over the sport. If there's one thing that the Russians have really done in hockey in the last few years, is create just this mass of goaltenders that are coming. And Akhtyamov is looking like the next one, and really a very interesting player. 3-0-0 to start his professional North American career, a .964 save percentage. You saw games in the KHL last season. He's been, part of the Russian system. Not, he's young still. But you think about, Shesterkin and Sorokin and Vasilevsky. I don't know if I can put him in that category, but certainly based off of his AHL start, he's making a very smooth transition to the AHL. So another name to keep in mind. And also, what a great thing for him to get tutored by Matt Murray, who is his tandem mate as the other goaltender with the Toronto Marlies, a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. All right, so lots of great AHL stuff this week, the past week, and then also make sure you're reading Patrick Williams, myself. We're doing a lot of AHL specific content on FloHockey.tv, so do not miss that. And now we're going to move on to talking about what's coming up on Flo Hockey. And certainly it has been a great amount of fun for us. Last weekend, the ECHL got going, the SPHL got going, so everybody is going now. And we have plenty and plenty more to come your way here on Flo Hockey. But wanted to alert you to the AHL Game of the Week. This is a free game that you can watch across social platforms. And if you are a Flo Hockey subscriber, you could still watch it, as you often do on Flo Hockey or via the Flo Sports app. But this game of the week, it'll be the San Diego Gulls, AHL affiliate of the Anaheim Ducks, and the Abbotsford Canucks, of course, the AHL affiliate of the Vancouver Canucks. And Abbotsford has plenty of very interesting players, as does San Diego. You think about where the Anaheim Ducks are in terms of prospect pools, one of the strongest in the NHL, and certainly that is reflected on their roster in San Diego. So we will be keeping a close eye on the San Diego Gulls and the Abbotsford Canucks. That'll be on Saturday. The night before, on Friday, will be our ECHL game of the week. Atlanta taking on three-time defending Kelly Cup champion Florida Everblades, both the Kelly Cup and the Stanley Cup residing in Florida. The Everblades now affiliated with the St. Louis Blues, Atlanta affiliated with the Nashville Predators. That it will be our ECHL game of the week, free across social platforms on Friday night. So do not miss that either. Also, as I mentioned a little while ago during our college segment, number 4 in the country, Michigan State, is hitting the road to take on Canisius in Buffalo. It'll be 2 games. Atlantic Hockey America is a partner of Flo Hockey. We have all of their home non-conference games, so you'll be able to see the number 4 Michigan State Spartans go in against the Golden Griffins of Canisius, and that will be on Friday and Saturday night. So make sure you tune in to that, because there's a lot of great teams. Trey Augustine, the goaltender, probably going to be Team USA's goaltender for the World Juniors, and certainly one of the best goalies in the country. Was able to get a win against Boston College earlier in the season. And so Michigan State hitting the road for one, and we will have that game for you here. Also in the USHL, got to call out the Lincoln Stars. They are 8-1 to start the season, a red hot start for Lincoln Stars. They will play a home-and-home series this weekend against the Tri-City Storm. Those games are always intense. 2 Nebraskan rivals going head-to-head on Flo Hockey, so make sure you do not miss that home-and-home series featuring the 8-1 Lincoln Stars. Really impressive performance from Lincoln so far this season. All right. Whew. Did you get all that? I hope you got all that. And don't forget, you got to subscribe to Flo Hockey. I mean, get that annual subscription. Make sure you can watch however many games. We had, I believe, like something in a few 600. I don't know. We have a few thousand games every month. It's just insane the amount of action that you can watch here on Flo Hockey at the various levels. So make sure you do that. All right, we're going to move on to our listener Q&A, as we do so often here on this podcast. Lots of great questions. We've got AHL related questions, World Junior related questions, NCAA, and everything else. We are going to get to it all for you right here, just as soon as I take a sip of water to prepare myself to hydrate for these tremendous questions that we got. All right. This first one is a combo. We'll talk about both college hockey and the AHL here from the Grindline podcast. Do the Detroit Red Wings have the next Swayman and Ullmark in Kosa and Augustine? Oh boy. So yeah, you think about it, that the Boston Bruins had a Vezina winning goalie and a young up and coming goalie at the same time. Meanwhile, 2 of the best goaltending prospects in the NHL are now underneath the banner of the Detroit Red Wings. So can they be the next Ullmark and Swayman? That's going to be an interesting thing, because think about the dynamic of having 2 top prospects. I think the thing between Ullmark and Swayman is Ullmark was more established, and then Swayman was kind of on the rise. In this case, you look at Kosa and you look at Augustine. Now, Kosa is in his 3rd professional season. Augustine is still in college, very likely going to go to the AHL as soon as next season in Grand Rapids. But then by that point, you're hoping that Kosa's at the NHL level, getting more experience and becoming more established. So I do think that Detroit has a chance to have one of the best goaltending tandems if both of those guys hit on their projection. Kosa is big, athletic, fast, kind of unorthodox at times, can be a little wild. Augustine is controlled, not quite as big, high end on hockey sense, not a lot of wasted movement. They are very different goaltenders. They give you a different look. And I think if you're an NHL team, that's got to make you excited. We have 2 goalies that you have to prepare for. We're not going to tell you which one of them is starting, and you're going to have to prepare for one of these guys. I do think that those 2 together give Detroit such a tremendous asset. Now, the problem becomes if one of them establishes themselves as the clear number one, how does that make the other one feel? How do they play? How do they perform? Are they okay taking a back seat? You've got Kosa as the first round pick. Augustine is the second round pick. It creates a very interesting dynamic in terms of investment from the team, does it not? So that's going to be another thing. But I do think, to answer your question directly, Detroit has an opportunity, should both of those guys hit their projection, to have one of the best goaltending tandems if both of those guys stick it out. And so, yes, I think, is it the next Ullmark and Swayman? Very well could be. I think way back in the day, going back to when I was a big hockey fan of the Chicago Blackhawks growing up, they had Eddie Belfour and Dominik Hasek at the same time. I don't think it's going to be that good. Two Hall of Famers right there. But, I'm trying to put some more insane pressure on those players in Detroit because there's already quite a bit there. All right, let's head over to the Chicago Blackhawks. And this is a question from Matapumo. The question is, what's your take on Lukas Reichel and how he's being developed? So really interesting question, because I think Lukas Reichel is a player that has been a top prospect, has been a guy. It just hasn't clicked at the NHL level. You look back at his history. Chicago drafts him out of Germany. They send him to the AHL. He's close to a point per game player as a rookie. Very, very promising. Gets about 15 games in the NHL. Does okay. And basically he's had a number of false starts, and Chicago has to keep kind of resetting him. They've sent him to Rockford a few times. He went there last season for a little bit. This feels like he's only 22 years old, which I think is so easy to forget because he's now been here for 3 seasons. And you're saying, well, it's got to be time, right? It's got to be time. Well, it doesn't really always happen that way for these players. And so Lukas Reichel, in terms of how he's been developed, you can't complain about what's happened. When he's in Rockford, he's obviously performed. The question is where's the disconnect? How come he can't become that top 6 skilled forward at the NHL level on a consistent basis? And sometimes that's on development. Sometimes that's on the player. He's never been an overly big guy. He's never been an overly strong guy, but he's been extremely skilled and has high-end hockey sense. I think, if he doesn't figure it out now, the Blackhawks are going to have to probably make a decision in terms of what is the long-term future of this player. And maybe a change of scenery works out better for him. But I think Lukas Reichel has the skill. He has the ability. He has every tool that you can ask him to have to potentially, make an impact at the NHL level. But until he does it, you just never know if it's really going to come. So I don't think it's necessarily a development thing. I just think there's been some level of disconnect in how he's performed in the AHL and why it's not translating in the NHL. And I wish I had a better answer than that, but that's really what I have here. Next question comes from one of my favorite usernames that we get here, and this is Giant Lady Squirrels. Yes, Giant Lady Squirrels. I just want to make sure I got that right. Heard you mention last week that LJ Mooney's injury isn't serious. Do you have any more info or thoughts on when he might be back? Unfortunately, I don't have an update on LJ Mooney. He has not played since he sustained that big knee-on-knee hit in against Notre Dame earlier in the season. I have not heard when he'll be back, so unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you. What I can say, obviously, is this is a player that is in desperate need to get back in terms of his draft stock, but also in terms of the U18 team really needs him. He's a tenacious player. He's one of their top guys. He's a dependable scorer for them, and so they pretty much need him to get back as quickly as possible. But again, you can't rush it. And certainly as a player like him and his size, there's always going to be concerns about injuries and different things. I think in this particular case, it was a really unfortunate hit. I didn't ever see a clear enough video to say that there was ill intent or it was just a bad collision. But either way, my hope is that Mooney comes back because he's a lot of fun to watch. All right, we go back to the Chicago Blackhawks here, and this one comes to us from Nate Hawk, 1688. Nate asks, when do you think Oliver Moore signs with Chicago, and can you see him potentially playing beside Connor Bedard? Well, there's been a lot of questions about whether or not Oliver Moore is going to be a center in the NHL. I think ideally for Chicago, he is a center. I think he could be a 2-3. We'll kind of see it. He needs to be a more consistent finisher in order for him to really be a true number 2 center. I think his defensive capabilities and his speed, you want him to be, able to do a lot of different things. I think that he could fit a lot of different roles too. So I don't necessarily see him as a winger for Connor Bedard, because I don't think that, really Oliver Moore is much of a playmaker per se, a guy that's going to get, but what he is and why it could potentially work is that he is an absolute hunter when it comes to getting pucks, getting after pucks, possessing pucks to get, and transitioning pucks as well. So those make him a good fit. But I just think for me, he's a center. He's going to be a good center. He's going to be a guy that, if he hits his projection, the top of his projection, he's a number 2 center, but I think he could be an excellent number 3 center. And the way that those guys are used now, energy, scoring depth, those kinds of things, I think he's going to be a guy that plays away from Bedard in order to give Chicago a little bit more versatility throughout their lineup. So that's my personal opinion on that one. So thanks, Nate, for the question. All right, next one comes to us from Jenna. Any takeaways from the first few weeks of NCAA play? Who surprised you the most? Early thoughts on potential of Denver repeating? All right. Well, we went over this a little bit earlier, but I do want to kind of reiterate some of the other things, some of the other impressions that I have from the first few weeks of NCAA play. The one thing I say about every October ever is that the results really do not tell you the story of what that team's going to be. I think back to last year in Denver in particular, and their early season results were not good. They had some wins, but they didn't look like a title contending team. And that's something that I think will really have to be kind of figured out over these next little while here. But I think for the college hockey as a whole, I think that the parity has made it wide open. I feel like there's no such thing right now as a super team. There's not a team, even though you have teams like BC and Denver that have these tremendous recruiting classes and have all these experience returning. I still think that they're very much beatable in terms of what's in front of them, and I just don't think that it's easy for teams anymore to do what they're basically do what we've seen in previous years, where a team can kind of run roughshod over everybody and then waltzes into a national championship game. It doesn't happen often, but we have seen it before. And so I just think that the parity continues to look very strong. Now, again, am I reading too much into October results? Maybe, but I still think that there's a lot left to be figured out about this season. In terms of who has surprised me the most, I don't think that surprise is necessarily the right word, but I think that what some of you look at the top scorers and you see a lot of guys from Arizona State that have produced at a high level over the course of their early season. You see a number of players that have kind of made a more immediate impact. I think that I knew Cole Hudson was going to be an impactful player for Boston University, but I think that he's even exceeded my expectations in the early viewings that I've had of him so far this year. I think that there's been the disappointments. You look at Wisconsin, and I thought, under another year under Mike Hastings, even though they had so much loss from their skill from last year, I thought they were able to mitigate it enough. And so far it's been tough, but again, it's early. I would not anticipate that Mike Hastings is going to finish the season with a losing record for the first time, but you never really know either. But as far as Denver repeating, absolutely in the mix. I think that, from the second they returned Zeev Buya, Matt Davis, Jack Devine, I think that they basically had 1, 2, and 3 of a core that was going to essentially carry them. And I do think that Denver has a strong chance of repeating because of the continuity they've had in their roster. All right, the next one, we don't have a tweet to put up on the screen if you're watching. So this one came from a DM. So we'll come back to that next question in just a second. But I wanted to go to this DM that I got from George. And George asked, if Michaelh Hage, currently at the University of Michigan, keeps this play up, do you see him on Canada's roster for the World Juniors? Great question. I think that he's at least got to put himself on the radar here. I think his speed and his skill are factors that Canada is going to have to consider. He's been scoring. He's been a positive player throughout this season so far for Michigan. He's been a scorer. He's been everything that they've needed him to be with the amount of roster losses that they've had. And so I think that that's one where, we're going to have to see, ultimately what happens with Hockey Canada. But the thing that makes me kind of doubt that he'll be in the mix very much is that, they had a chance to bring him to the under 18 Worlds last season, chose not to. I think he very well could have been on that team and been a very good and impactful player on that team. You never really know exactly the motivations and why, they may not want this or that player. I think there's at least a chance they have to look at him with how well he's played so far. But, because he still has another year of eligibility, I don't think they're going to stretch to bring in an 18-year-old, a guy that they're not as familiar with, a guy they haven't seen in their international system as much. So for me, that's where I think that he might not get that look. But it's a good question nonetheless. I think if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, you have to be excited and happy with how he's played, because I thought maybe he would struggle a little bit with the amount of pressure that would be on him in Michigan to produce. Hasn't been an issue. He has done nothing but show up. All right, let's get to our next question here. Thank you, George, for that DM. You can always DM me questions if you'd rather not tweet them to me publicly. This one comes to us from Avco Cup. Who are you most interested to watch at the CHL-USA Prospects Challenge games? Are there any obvious snubs that weren't invited? In terms of snubs, I don't really think so. For me, it's too early in the draft season to really say like this or that player deserved it. The way the team was selected is that basically there was a survey sent out to the 32 teams in the NHL. After that survey, there was a number of players that kind of became part of a selection pool, and then the personnel from the CHL, which includes Dave Brown, the GM of Erie, Chris Mallett from the Kelowna Rockets, they made the decisions ultimately about what this roster would be. And I think it was ultimately pretty close to what it should have been. All the players I expected to be there are there. I didn't see any significant snubs, not to my eye. But to answer your first question about the player that I'm most interested to watch, I think the player that I'm most curious about is a guy I haven't seen live yet, and that is Cameron Schmidt. Schmidt has 12 goals in 11 games for Vancouver in the WHL. He's 5'8", not a very big guy, but he has been doing a great job of getting behind defenses and also showing off a really tremendous scorer's touch. Now, if you are a smaller player, can you find ways to mitigate that size by doing something special? This year, it's been scoring goals for Cameron Schmidt. So that's a player that I got a lot of time for. It's a player that I'm really excited to see in person, and I'm particularly excited to see him in this setting. When you are surrounded, when you put these players on the same ice and you put them in top prospects game, you can argue about their value, but when you see all of them together, it does allow you, and these players compete in these games. It's not like an all-star game in the NHL. These guys actually, they know what's on the line for themselves to have good performances. They'll compete. And I think that this is going to be a great setting, because once we see Cameron Schmidt out on the same ice and we see him with the Martones and the Malcolm Spences and whoever else is out there, you are going to notice whether or not that player is in that mix, if they can keep up, if they can dictate, if they can take over. It gives you a lot to look at. So Cameron Schmidt is the answer for that question. He's the player I'm most interested in seeing at the CHL-USA Prospects Challenge. I cannot wait to see what that event looks like in London and Oshawa next month. All right, that's it for the questions, I believe, today. I think we've got everybody lined up and done. I just wanted to say a huge thanks to everybody that did send in a question. Also, as always, thank you for listening and watching. However you interact with the show, I greatly appreciate it. I also want to give a huge shout out to Nikki for producing today and adding some of those video elements that you saw. We'll try and do that a little bit more as we get rolling. I continue to tease the new podcast is coming. The new podcast is coming. It's coming. It's just coming slowly. We've got a little bit more work to do, but we will be having a rebranded podcast here on Flo Hockey. I'm really excited to get that going. And excited to unveil the co-host and everything else. There's a lot of exciting things happening here at Flo Hockey, and certainly we want to keep you apprised of that. One last reminder, if you haven't yet, go subscribe to Flo Hockey right now, flohockey.tv/sign up. Make sure you get that that your subscription, get the annual subscription. It's $12.50 a month for the entire year, paid up front. You get that, you get all of that great stuff for us from the AHL, USHL, college hockey, tons of other things. And we've got so much original content coming your way, video content and more of everything. So we are going to do a lot going forward. All right. I think that's enough of a pitch. Hopefully you guys go do that. And hopefully you've continued to listen to the rest of the show. I really appreciate everybody that joined today's episode with their questions. And also, once again, thanks to Nikki for producing, you for listening. I'm Chris Peters. This is Talking Hockey Sense. We'll catch you next time.